Hello underwater friends. You've always liked over-under pictures but you don't know how to do it? Well, this video is for you. Today I'm gonna give you 7 tips on how to do a great over-under picture, also called split picture. Enjoy! Tip number 1. Choose a day without waves. You want to have a picture with some above, some under the water. So you need the line of the water to be as steady as possible. If there are big waves, it's going to be very difficult. First, your camera is going to be moving up and down all the time. And also, the waves are going to make it more difficult and almost impossible to make your shot. Like any picture, it's very important to choose a good location. You really want to have a nice background, which is going to be on land, and a foreground as nice as possible. You can always have an animal or a diver to make the underwater interesting, but if you have also corals and places where it's shallow, then it makes it easier to make it nicer. Tip number 2. For the equipment, you want to use a wide-angle lens. For me, I use a 16-35mm lens. It's an f4 Zeiss Sony. And with my full-frame camera, it's enough. Other option is to use a fisheye lens. Both of them will work. I prefer the non-distorted one. With this lens, you really need to have a dome port. I've seen that you can even get some for GoPros, and it's very important because actually the camera will take a picture of the reflection on the dome. And the bigger the dome, the easier it's going to get to have the line of the surface of the water in one place and then have enough space on top and in the bottom to make a nice composition. Tip number 3, use a small aperture. An aperture between f16 and f22 is generally what you want. You have to understand that at the surface and underwater, the density is different. So because of this, the focus will be different. So you really want a small f-stop, actually with a big number, to make sure that everything is in focus. Tip number 4, you want to make your focus underwater. Your subject underwater is going to be closer to you and you want it to be sharp because it's going to be your foreground. So it's very important to have it sharp. The background, like we said before, with a small f-stop, will always be quite sharp and sharp enough. So by focusing underwater, you're going to have a nice picture. Tip number 5, you want to make your exposure with the top side. The reason being, most of the time, the top will be lit more than the surface, and if you have a good exposure underwater, the surface will be too bright. And actually, sometimes even you're gonna burn your picture. So, better to make your exposure with the top side, and like this, it's gonna be easier to adjust. Tip number 6, you want to lit the bottom. Actually, what's underwater. So put your strobes down underwater, both of them, if you have two, and lit your subject. Like we said in the previous tip, the surface will be more lit than underwater, so it's important to try to bring some light underwater. You can always adjust in either Photoshop or Lightroom or any editing software that you're going to use. But like for any picture, it's always better to have a good picture to start with. So lit your underwater subject and the picture is going to be more even and easier to process. Tip number 7 and final tip, you don't want to have droplets on your camera. So there are techniques. Some people will put the camera in the water and then bring it up and directly take the picture, which is going to avoid having too many droplets on the dome. But it's not always enough. Especially if you have an acrylic port, it's important to put baby shampoo on your dome, like you would do with a mask. Like this, the droplets will slide on the housing. It's better to put the shampoo for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes before you go diving. Put some everywhere, just a thin layer, and let it dry a little bit. When you get in the water, there will be much less drops, and actually the drops are gonna slide nicely on your dome. I hope this video was useful, and thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you're interested in knowing how I do my underwater photos, you can check how to do an underwater photo. And if you want to see bigger animals, you may check Mola Mola 4K, a nice video I made in Nusa Penida. Thank you! Bye bye!